us. Stay with us.
Oh, that debate is going to be
It's gonna be a nice,
filthy.
Yep, basically
Because that animal
a complete disaster.
on one side, and super old on the other. I mean, this is going to be.
Stay with the.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the Perspectives of Black Men. This is a podcast covering trending topics all through a Black lens. My name is Dr. Kellen Scantlebury, and I'm here with
Coach Smith
and
Dr. Aaron Johnson.
And we are coming to you live from the belly of the beast, Chelsea, Manhattan, from Fit Club Physical Therapy. Tonight, we have a very, very, very special guest. We like to call her our super fan. She is really team Perspectives of Black Men. She is a super woman as well, who's doing a lot of amazing things in the community that we're going to really touch base on tonight. We are joined by Judith, last name?
Montalban.
Yes. So welcome. Could you please introduce yourself to the people for us?
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for having me. I'm truly humbled and honored. And I support the vision and the mission of what you're doing. So my name is Judith Montalban. I am a first generation Haitian American born here. So I'm a product of immigration. So I always like to make sure people understand that immigration looks different, different views, different people. And I am a community and youth engagement specialist. I focus on working with community members to become change agents. And I work with youth professionally so they can become peer educators around public health and tobacco control issues. And those just to name a few, but we'll get into more throughout the podcast.
When I heard your name, I was thinking about Ricardo Montalban from what was that?
Fantasy Island.
When I read it, I was like, I'm not even gonna make a joke today about Fantasy Island because who I don't even know people old enough to remember that, but
I do remember the plane. I love Fantasy Island.
Word.
And that is always a common, are you Rick Bladed? No, we're not.
So we know you do a lot of amazing things in the community, Judith. So tonight we really just want to start by, talking about a few things. I know one of the things is going over and police brutality in Long Island, and you have an initiative there. So I would love for you to just explain that initiative to the people, and we'll dive a little deeper in depth as well.
Awesome. All right. So I have my notes out, so I'll be looking at my notes because I want to make sure I highlight some points. So Frederick Brewington, who's the leading civil rights attorney on Long Island, put together a coalition called Long Island Advocates for Police Accountability. And what the vision is it's community members, organizations, attorneys, people like myself who want to look at making a change. And this was put in place in response to the murder of George Floyd.
Right.
So I am going to just get up some key points that we want to talk about. Our coalition has actively about 40 plus members. But we have other community organizations and community partners like Women's Diversity Network, NAACP, a couple of other organizations. And what we do is we have moved forward to explore and engage our local law enforcement agencies in following through with our governor's executive order.
Right.
So have you guys had a chance?
To what extent was there pushback to that?
So the executive order was put in place in June. That's when Governor Cuomo announced it. We are now in October, and we're seeing our local law enforcement, both in Nassau and Suffolk, announcing that they have identified what we call a PACT, which is Protecting American Communities Task Force. So Nassau County has identified that they have started their initiative, and Suffolk County just recently announced that they have started their initiative. But this executive order was put in place in June.
Wow. Wow.
So at the end of the show, I can look up the dates to tell you exactly when a press release was made by Nassau County and Suffolk County to give you dates. So, Dr. Johnson, you talked about the history of policing on a prior episode, and a lot of people are not aware of the history of policing, right? So what we want to do as community members, as Long Island advocates for police accountability, we want to hold our local law enforcement accountable. We want to talk about civilian complaint review boards. Us, the people in the community that pay taxes, should be part of this, stakeholders in the community, and not people who are just going to go with the flow. We need individuals that are going to give some kickback.
Right.
And ask the hard questions.
Right, and I was going to ask about the complexion of these boards, because a lot of times people who want to get involved aren't the ones who are actually being disproportionately targeted or impacted by police brutality or police misconduct.
Correct. So that is one of the things that Long Island Advocates for Police Accountability challenged both county executives and both Nassau and Suffolk PD about, making sure that it's an inclusive and diverse representation of individuals, not just people that you're appointing just to be appointing. So they have identified an array of individuals. They've posted it on their website so that they're transparent about who's on these PAC units or PAC coalitions, whatever you want to call them. They're diverse as far as age, different sectors of the community. There's law enforcement, there's individuals from the legal aid service, but Long Island Advocates for Police Accountability really push that narrative that there needs to be a diverse representation on these coalitions or PACs that we're putting together. So we're going to really see the nature and how it flows starting now, because the work is really going to start to get done. They're doing town halls in Suffolk County, and I'll make sure I put it in the chat. They're going to have town hall meetings in each precinct, and they're going to allow for individuals in the community to come out and speak and talk about the issues that are going on with local law enforcement. So yeah, of course, there's going to be some pushback, because let's just be honest. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. Me doing this work, that puts a target on my back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, yep. That's just the honest to God truth. That put just doing that work alone. Anybody who wants to go against the grain puts a target on their back. So of course you're going to have pushback, because now we're asking for accountability.
Right. So
as you all just recently saw, or maybe not, Suffolk County PD released a report yesterday.
Yep.
With so you saw it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So and it's showing
viewers who don't know. Could you just please explain?
Yes, I'm sorry. I apologize.
So I jump in and say it, but I was like, I don't want to step on her. So
go ahead, Dr. Johnson, because I'm going to pull it up too.
A report that was recently published essentially said that there is a disproportionality of stops and arrests by Suffolk PD. Black and brown people are disproportionately stopped and in question, and then obviously that normally it leads to our disproportionate arrest as well. So the information has been out there, community wise, it's been out there, county wise, it's been out there in the city. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's weird that this moment is shining a light on new studies and things of that nature, but it's like, well, we've been talking about this since the 1960s. Dr. King was talking about police brutality. Malcolm X was talking about police brutality. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense was talking about police brutality. And before that, they were talking about police brutality. So it's just, it underscores that our issues are not significant until white people deem it so.
Say that again.
It's a shame that our narratives, that's why the perspectives of Black men is so important, because they need to, what becomes important for us is that our narratives are empowered and they hold as much weight as others, so that we can have the necessary conversations.
So essentially this report that came out established the Long Island version of stop and frisk.
Essentially. Okay. Right.
Correct. And that report was completed by the Finn Institute. We already knew this, right? So seeing that report wasn't a shock, kind of like Dr. Johnson said. So where Long Island Advocates for Police Accountability come in is, okay, we have this information. And again, we're not the only organization or coalition doing this work. There are several other organizations. But we want to say, okay, we knew this information. Now what?
Right.
Mm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What's the plan moving forward?
Right. Where do we go from here?
Right,
Right.
because you have the facts.
Right.
The facts
Right.
are so in black and white.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm good.
What's frustrating is that the facts don't even matter to certain
don't.
people. Like we've always had the facts. It's here. What do we do now? And what I've come to notice, bumping my head up against the wall in the education sector, is that if we don't will it, if we don't want it, we ain't doing it. That's how these people are. Hegemony, right? Hegemony, right? Dominance. I don't care. If it makes me uncomfortable, the facts of the matter it just doesn't matter to me. And it's sick.
Unless we come out in force.
Have
Right.
to.
Yeah, we have to come out in force. So that's why having this conversation right now here on the perspectives of Black men, being able to give real tangible information to our viewers and our followers, Judy. So I would ask you, have they set these dates for these meetings?
Yes.
They have?
So I have the dates for Suffolk County, and I can definitely share them with you right now because I'm going to pull them up. So they have set the dates. It is a town hall style. Now, let me just reiterate. They did this right after the death of Michael Brown. The murder of Michael Brown. I don't know if you guys recall, but Suffolk kind of did this before. And I remember going to one of those town halls, and it was very raw, very fresh because of what happened. And listening to us is great, but what are the action steps behind listening to us? What does real reform look like?
Right.
Okay. So when Long Island Advocates for Police Accountability, we have put a plan together and we're working with the other organizations. One of the things that we're addressing and we're looking at is community supports. So one of the issues is we want to see the 911 calls. All right. So if a 911 call goes out, and which we've seen, right, welfare checks gone wrong, who's going out on these calls? We want to see how the call came in, who's going out. We want to assure and make sure that we're not cutting budgets and services to community organizations that should be responding to these crises. So a mental health check or a welfare check should not result in someone being murdered.
Are these town halls going to be virtual or in person? Because we're still in COVID land COVID season.
I'm going to tell you right now. I believe the ones in Suffolk. I want to make sure I don't want to misspeak, so I want to make sure I have the information up in front of me, so I can tell you if it'll be in person. So here we are.
Well, good. We are talkers, and I'm trying to restrain myself. But
so it's virtual. There you go. I got you.
It's virtual.
Yep. Suffolk County is having 8 virtual public listening sessions, with the first one starting with the first precinct, the town of Babylon, Tuesday, October 27th. And then the second precinct, which is town of Huntington, November 4th, third precinct, town of Islip, 11/11, fourth precinct, town of Smithtown, 11/17, fifth precinct, town of Islip, 12/1, sixth precinct, town of Brookhaven, 12/9, seventh precinct, town of Brookhaven East to Riverhead and Southampton town lines. That's 12/15, and East End towns, because those are villages and incorporations. That's on December 21st. And I'll make sure I share this and send this information so it could be in the chat. And those are all virtual town halls. So there should be no reason that none of us are on and speaking our truths.
Right.
And
Right.
we'll make sure that we also put that into the YouTube thread as well underneath this video, to make it very easily accessible for anyone who wants that information. I want to go back really quickly to stop and frisk, because I think that is a very interesting topic. I would love to hear everyone's perspective on stop and frisk. I had an interesting conversation with a patient of mine actually this week, and he was actually a proponent of stop and frisk. So, and he is of Hispanic descent. So I just want to talk to you guys a little bit, because I think that is a very interesting topic for all of us.
I want to give you guys, or at least the guests, the first.
Yeah, I was going to give Judy.
Well, I'll just say, let me just say quickly, you talked about stop and frisk. And one of the things that I've noticed on Long Island, living on Long Island, is living in Amityville, living in Bay Shore, the sections in areas where we live, they tend to have like these police stops on the on and off ramps where you merge onto Sunrise Highway or off Sunrise Highway or Southern State, whichever. But when I go into some other towns, I never have ever had to go through a checkpoint, not once. So.
Well, I think you hit it right on the head, right? You just said, like, in certain communities, you see these checkpoints at the on and off ramp. I live in the town of Brookhaven. I live in Medford, and I rarely come off of the expressway through a checkpoint. Rarely. It doesn't happen. But if I go into certain areas, like you said, Brentwood, Central Islip, those exit ramps, there are times that there is a checkpoint. And we have to really look at the over-policing within our communities. And why are we over-policing in our communities? And what's the outcome? What are the initiatives?
I'm glad you asked the necessary questions, and we need a lot more people in our community asking these questions. If you look at the actual research, right, the statistics coming out of all of the years of stop and frisk, they rarely lead to convictions of serious crimes. So when someone's saying, and this is overwhelmingly disproportionately stopping young Black men. So when people are saying that they're a proponent of, you really have to get into their psyche. It's about how they feel rather than what is. And a lot of times racism and the way in which we are dealt with is based upon white people's feelings, or even if you said it was a Latino man, a lot of times proximity to whiteness leads people to act in certain ways. So I noticed that unfortunately, so-called minorities are in a haste or in a contest to be the second, the next best second-class citizen, right? They're in a haste to be the first second-class citizen instead of demanding equity, that proximity to whiteness. So it doesn't yield. It hasn't done anything to lessen crime. They have the broken windows theory, and it's not about that. It's really targeting Black people. That's what law enforcement has done since law enforcement was created.
And honestly, it makes it very easy for anyone else to get away with stuff. You put on a suit, you put on a briefcase, and you don't get stopped. But you have a do-rag on, and you have a hoodie, and your pants down, and let me talk to this young man, right? Organized crime understands that, and now they say, hey, all right, this is what the police are going after. We're going to do the exact opposite, and now we can do actual major crime and not have any repercussions. So I just thought it was very interesting.
But racialization even prevent, even in a suit, Black men getting stopped and frisked. I'm wearing a hoodie right now, and I'm a large man, so I have done nothing wrong.
5 times.
I don't look
not just 5 degrees, but like just 5 times the size of any average man.
So it's like if I'm stopped in the street, they clearly, if there's something, if they feel fearful, there could be something out of nowhere, depending upon how I react to their brand of disrespect or brand of questioning or whatever. It's scary that we have to live a completely different existence than other people because of someone else's stereotypes and fears.
Over criminalization of Black men. You can label us a criminal and then you take away our rights. So we're trying to bring that to the forefront, and Judy is on the front lines of that. So we thank you so much for that.
Word.
It's a good segue because that's what I want to talk about, you being on the front lines and how important having, soldiers out there actually, getting this information out in the community. And so I know that, you do this as a career as well, but I know it's a lot more than that for you. I know you have a 24-year-old son, and I just figure, to ask you what motivates you, what drives you to be such a strong advocate for your community, because I don't think enough people realize how important it is to have advocacy in the community by our own people. It's like the representation that we have in the precincts. I went to a march in Amityville a few months back, and it was because two young black brothers got into it with each other, and one was killed unnecessarily. And so, the police officers, they escorted us, along the route. There wasn't one black police officer. They were all white. And it's like, how fair is that to us not being able to have someone who can at least relate to us in our communities to actually make us feel safe, especially with all the prejudice and racism and all the ideology that is spread from one race or another. Like, how is it that we don't have our own representation in our communities?
So he gave you couple of questions there.
But, yeah.
I want to make sure you
Really
caught that.
questions. Sorry, I apologize.
No, I got it. I definitely can multitask. First, I want to start.
Question coming at you.
So our followers on Facebook are saying that your volume is low.
Okay.
All right.
And I just want to say Black don't crack, and she has a 24-year-old son.
I'm like, damn.
Let's throw that out there.
Judy, what
Can you hear me now? Can they hear me better now?
plan?
We can hear you well. So
Okay, so I'm gonna hold this to my because I don't have the cool headphones like you guys do. Okay. So, all right. For the first part, I want to say is that I wasn't always this person, right?
Okay.
Because we all have families, we all have obligations. So, back in the day, I was, somebody else can do it. Someone else can go to that meeting. Someone else could do it. But I felt like I wasn't living in my purpose. And I will say this, with keeping his, I don't want to give too much of his information because I try to always respect my son's privacy. But we lived in Central Islip. We were in the Central Islip School District. And I started to feel that he was being targeted. Now, granted, I know who I'm dealing with, so I know what to expect, and I know what he's capable of doing and what he wasn't capable of doing. But I started to realize a pattern. And it started to be like, I felt like they were calling me because like he's breathing. Like that's how it became. I remember a teacher calling me about an assignment and made a really big deal about it. And I go to parent teacher conference that same evening. And I said, wasn't that the assignment that you called me about that he was missing? And she's like, no, it couldn't have been. I said, no, that's the assignment you told me that he didn't hand in. And it turned into this big commotion. And she said, I must have made a mistake. But hours ago, you were calling me like, I don't know what to do with him. This is so, as a parent, I was like, okay, wait a minute. I'm noticing a pattern here. And I have to tell you that my sister, who's an educator, suggested I read this book. And it's The Counter Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. I'm sure Dr. Johnson.
Kwanzaa Kunjufu?
Yes. Okay. I read that book. He was about in 4th grade, and it changed my perspective and it changed my thought process. And then I started to look around and say, oh my gosh, he's been in school all these years and never had a Black educator. We had Mr. Manny, who was the janitor, and Mr. Manny was awesome and the kids loved him, but that's all that they saw. So as the years went on, I'm just like seeing things going on in the community. I'm seeing issues that are affecting people in my community, and people from outside our community are coming in to kind of tell us where to go. So a friend of mine who is no longer with us, Sandra Gill, saw the work that I was doing and was like, listen, there's this program called Parent Leadership Initiative. I think you should join the program. It's 16 weeks of training, but it's so worth it because it will give you the skills and the tools that you need to become an effective community advocate. Not just a community advocate, but an effective community advocate. So it was at that moment when I took that program in 2013. I mean, I've always done little things and advocated, but where I became like officially like boots to the ground, making sure that I'm connected in my community, and not only my community. If I go into community to work, that's my community. We live on Long Island. We are all a community. So that is one of the reasons, like Parent Leadership Initiative was definitely a catalyst in who you see today before you. And I have made so many connections through that program, but I also recruit people for that program. So I put my hand back and say, hey, why don't you come on? I see the work you're doing, just like Sandra did for me, and say, hey, why don't you come and get the skills and knowledges and the tools so that you can now do this effectively? So that's how and what made me really step into this area of community advocacy. And as far as being on the front lines, I definitely want to make sure I say that I'm on the front lines to an extent, but one of the things that I recognize is that there's a younger generation out there that's really on the front lines. So I'm on the front lines in the back. Like, you'll see me at a lot of community events, making sure I connect people, doing civic engagement, voter registration drives. But as far as when it comes to this movement, I'm on the front lines doing the work behind closed doors. I'm taking Monday meetings with Long Island advocates for police accountability. We're on a call every week. Sometimes we're on a call 2 to 3 times a week. This week we were on a call at 10 o'clock at night because there was a change that we needed to respond to. So I just want to say I am on the front lines, but to an extent, really the individuals, because I want to shout them out, that are on the front lines are the participants from Young Long Island for Justice. Now, they are on the front lines. They are at the protests. They are doing the caravans, and they are out there telling people we are no longer gonna take no for an answer. We are no longer gonna do things your way. So that's the frontline piece. I wanted to make sure I share that.
I'm glad you said that, because that's the, we've been talking about everybody, allowing for space for us to have these conversations, but leading to not much change. The question that I have is, like, to what extent are we providing, and I'm not saying making demands, but basically providing kind of an outline or a framework that they can respond to, like, and we'll be waiting for your response, almost like forcing their hand, like, yeah, you're not just here to hear us. We'll be waiting for the response to these issues and concerns that we have shared with you.
So one of the things I want to share and just tell you that not only our organization, but the organization I just named and Women's Diversity Network are actually putting demands in place. If you go to our Facebook page, if you go to Long Island Advocates for Police Accountability's website, you're going to see the demands that we made. And one of the demands was that we get 2 individuals on their PAC that are part of our coalition. And these are people that are boots on the grounds doing the work, and they should have been on that coalition. So that is a demand that, we addressed, and those 2 individuals are now in the coalition. But there are other demands that we're working on. So I don't want to, jump out and tell you all of them, but I will say one of the things that I mentioned was like the 911 calls, and seeing if a 911 call comes over as a mental health call. Are we contacting the mobile crisis unit? When we call, if it's a welfare check, is the mobile crisis unit being called? If I do know that years ago in Nassau County, they did make some changes because it was after the death and murder of Joanna Bird, who was killed by her perpetrator, who was, I don't remember if he was her partner at the time, but it was a domestic violence issue. And she called the authorities. They came to where he was at and basically just told him to take a walk. Well, he took a walk and he came back and he murdered that young lady. So her children were left without a mother. So I know they made some changes after that on how they respond to domestic violence calls. I know that they're working on language access in Nassau and Suffolk County, because what happens when you go into a call and now there's a language barrier? The child in the home should not be interpreting. That should never be. So we need to hold them accountable and say, are you using the language access line? Are you making sure that the language barrier is not creating any type of anxiety for you and the individual that you're coming to help?
Yep.
So, those are one of the demands that we're asking. We want to look at overtime. We want to look at overtime. Before this conversation ends, I'm going to pull up an article to tell you about New York City. I couldn't find Suffolk and Nassau's numbers, but I want to tell you how much New York City paid out in settlements.
Oh, they kill. And see, that's the thing that gets me too. You know, these folks who politically say, oh, we're for fiscal responsibility, but you have no problem paying out settlements for police abuse. Why?
Right.
Because Black people are being disproportionately abused as well as brown people. It's like you will accept paying out those millions for the abuse that's handed out for officers that probably shouldn't be on the job, but you're for fiscal responsibility. I always ask my students in class, and we've been talking about police brutality, and I asked them, I said, do you think this would happen in the inverse where Black officers would pretty much be policing dominantly white areas, and if those white children ended up dead, would they just allow for those officers to go on about their business with no accountability and no change? And they were like,
that is a phenomenal point right there.
And then my kids in my class were like, hell no. They went in. They're like, of course not. And I'm like, so think about how we are socialized.
You just don't see it.
Right. This socialization that we almost deserve this. Or just accept it and expect it, and you'll be all right.
The cop
just do the right thing.
The cop that was in Harlem who got scared in the stairwell and
shot off in the Pinckney projects, right?
Yep, that's it. Like, how do you allow that to happen? And that's a real question that, you know, these groups are looking to get answers to, because it is very, very, very important. I want to just go back a little bit, Judy, when you were talking about, you know, you were always in the community, but you had to learn to effectively help your community. This show is all about giving away game. And I would love for you to share maybe one or two things that made you more effective in your community, because you're impacting Long Island, but we have listeners who are listening in California. We have listeners from Florida. We have listeners in Texas. How can these individuals become more effective in their own communities?
So one thing I will always say is that everyone has like community stakeholders, right? And it could be the granny on the block that watched everybody grow up to, the youngest member. So everyone is and can be an effective community advocate. But what works for me is I tell everyone, when you go into a community or go in and we look at our community or your community, first look at the problem. Okay. And when you look at the problem, identify what structures triggered or created this problem. So we see it all the time. Gentrification is happening, not only on Long Island, but we see it happening rapidly in the 5 boroughs. Okay. So, what are the causes of the problem? Are they outside structures? Or are they internal structures? Then when we look at the problem, okay, after you dissect the problem, what is an action that you can take? So I'm going to give you a simple action that worked for me. We had a 4-way corner in Central Islip that constantly had like car accidents. It was right on Ferndale Boulevard. Like you couldn't go like a season without having 2 to 3 accidents there. So what I learned through PLI is when I took this program is who do I need to call to get a 4-way stop sign so that we can reduce the numbers, because it didn't stop it, but it did reduce the numbers of accidents that we saw. So Right. So I looked at that and I contacted our local town hall, made a phone call, find out who I had to speak to. And let me explain something to you. It's not just one phone call. It took several phone calls, emails, and follow up, and going to a town hall meeting.
So it's
and
not
doing my research.
So I think that's also, a great point for our listeners to know that, hey, don't stop with one phone call. You might have to email. You might have to show up to town hall. They need to hear your voice.
And another thing for the internet woke warriors who are only engrossed in this 4-year presidential election and basically act like our liberation is on the ballot. Engage your community in multiple ways, in the ways in which you can get in where you fit in. Stop getting on the internet, and especially if you have a platform talking about this person ain't going to do this, this ain't going to do this. What are you doing in your local communities? We have a lot of people who pay for their platform and they sell you things, but they're not doing a damn thing. They have absolutely no receipts in the community. at all.
Mhm.
So let's stop being led by people and start to lead ourselves. And good leaders create the capacity for leadership for others. So you have one, Judith Montalban, is on this call, on this podcast, basically giving you some game to learn how you could lead in your community.
Yeah, the internet is great. It's good for reach, but what's going to really make impact is, you being in your community.
Right.
Because it could be a cesspool too.
Right. And we have to go back to I'm a grassroots person. So I believe in street corner advocacy, like standing on the corner with a blowhorn and saying, hey, did you know the HEAP application is open today? And you need to apply for HEAP. You need to do it right away, because when these resources are available, that as quick as they open up, as quick as the funds dry out. So I believe in, I was out last week. We did voter registration right in front of one of the stores here. And we stood outside, and guess what? Some people weren't friendly, but some people were. And no matter if I get one person engaged or 20 people engaged, the point is that I'm speaking to people, that I'm talking to individuals. So when you go from a problem, action, solution format, like you look at the problem, then you look at the action steps that you can take. And then you look at your community stakeholders to see who can help you achieve your goal. Let me tell you, I'm all about a collaborative approach.
Oh, we understand that. We respect, because the stuff that you're doing for us for no reason, just because you respect what we're trying to do in our communities. We appreciate that. Again, I'm gonna underscore for the people who are watching, game. Get in your communities, identify stakeholders, look for solutions. It's not about you complaining every 2 seconds on Facebook. You look crazy. You're doing nothing and you're ineffective. Get some game and start making change that way yourselves.
Do some research. The internet is your best friend, but when you do some research, don't just do your basic research. Like, there is something called the Freedom of Information Law. And let me tell you, oh my goodness. FOIL. That should be our best friend. I am learning hands-on, being in this coalition, how to do, go through that process and FOIL documents. And people need to hold not only our school districts accountable, but we need to hold our elected officials accountable. And local elections matter. I tell people this all the time. Do you know who your Suffolk County, your legislator is, Suffolk or Nassau? Do you know who your council district person is? Go to town hall, speak up. There are virtual meetings right now, so there's no reason that any of us should not be present. Prior to all this happening, our local precinct had community precinct meetings once a month. Guess who was up there? Me. Hi, how you doing? Shaking hands. I know 2 of the COPE officers in my area, because I do some stuff with them in the community, but I didn't know the rest of them. And when I looked around the room, do you know, out of maybe one of the meetings I went to, there were about 40 people in the room. There were two people that looked like me.
I think this is where the internet can really help us, right? Especially now with things being virtual, the ability to share information rapidly on the internet is a huge advantage for us. So again, we will put and post the links to these virtual meetings to make sure our Long Island listeners have access to this. Because again, with them being virtual, there's no excuse. You can be on your phone in an Uber and be on one of these town halls now. We have so much more access to doing this. So, and I honestly, I hope they keep this, post-COVID, because it just makes getting to these meetings a lot more accessible for the single mom who has to take care of her kid, who's also working, but wants to be in the community, but just doesn't have the time or resources to get there. Now with Zoom and the ability to do these things online, we have that capability, right? So now it's on us to share this information. So I'm really hoping, and we should honestly be pushing for it moving forward, because I think this is a huge opportunity for us.
I would think that it'll be in conjunction with, however, because some people get slick.
In conjunction with, yes.
Because if they can't be touched, they cut your mic off, like stuff like that.
Right.
Can't do that.
Not just Zoom,
that will
but
boil
Zoom
my,
and in person.
Yeah, that will burn me. I'm showing up. I'm coming to your job tomorrow. You're not going to cut me off, kind of thing. So yeah, you're definitely correct.
I love that.
I just want to say something to our participants, either on our YouTube channel or on Facebook Live. if you have a question for any of us or for Judy, please drop the question in the chat, and if we have time, we'll definitely get to some questions.
And subscribe to those channels.
Subscribe to the YouTube page, The Perspectives of Black Men. Like this video, please, and drop a comment.
And
Also
share.
on Instagram, yes.
And share. Like and then share.
This hasn't been monetized. This is giving out game. This is engaging our communities. We have similar problems across our nation. So the issues that we're having here on Long Island or New York City are the same issues that you're having in Dallas, are the same issues that you're having in Houston, Detroit,
Chicago.
Wherever we are, we have the same issues because racism follows us here in America.
And this is our time to unite. It's funny. It's crazy. So for those of the listeners who don't know, I have 2-year-old twins at home, and Sesame Street just did an episode on racism and how to actually bring about talking about racism to your kids.
Wow.
So I watched that episode with my kids, my wife this week, and I was doing work in the background, but I was locked in. It's actually phenomenal. I would love to maybe have our kids watch it and talk about it during one of the podcasts here. But it was educate, communicate, and unite. The last word, unite.
That's cool. That's dope. I like
so
that.
This is what we can do. This is a way that we can all unite. We can give game to our community as well as multiple communities across the country. So,
and by the way, Sesame Street, they have educators who are consulting them. So for a long time, we've understood that if we can get to children at a young age, we can eradicate racism. The question becomes, and I always ask my students this, I reference Jane Elliott, who says, give me a kid in 3rd grade, give me an 8-year-old, and we can get rid of racism. Give me 3rd graders and we can get rid of racism. I always say, why do you think that we have not had this as a countrywide initiative, a national initiative, if we can eradicate this thing? And everybody they fell back and started thinking like, whoa.
So you learn your fundamentals.
It was so powerful to see that. Shout out to Sesame Street.
Shout out to Sesame Street. That's dope. That's dope. I'm gonna go home and watch that tonight.
No, it's great. It's actually great.
Definitely have to check that out. And speaking of Jane Elliott, she was here on Long Island in January. Islip Town NAACP brought her in as a speaker. And I'm telling you, there should have been more educators in that room.
Right.
Considering the report that Hofstra just released about the amount and lack of diversity within our school districts, that room should have been, everyone should have been in there biting at the door to get in. And she broke it down. And I just thought, wow, how historical. Jane Elliott came to Long Island, to Suffolk County, one of the most segregated suburbs in the country, but yet it wasn't plastered on the front of Newsday.
Oh no, we can't do that. I think Kellen is about to, Dr. Scantleberry is about to go to our segment where they ask you, he asks you spitfire questions, and if the thing that comes to your mind, you answer it.
Okay.
This has been such an engaging conversation. We even lost time, kind of track of our segments, how we normally do it. But it's all good. Nothing was wasted here. This is great. So he's going to ask you those questions. He's going to set it up, and then
35 seconds shot clock.
Word.
Baby Judy, are you ready?
Word.
Does she know the premise?
You're ready.
We can't
ready.
hear it. Can you hear it?
I can't hear it either. Hold on. I think I lost you.
You didn't mute it.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can. Yeah.
Okay.
Gucci. All
I
right.
just took the earpieces off.
Okay.
All good. All right. So again, 35 seconds. I'm waiting for Divine. You let me know.
Okay.
In 3, 2, 1, go.
Favorite movie.
Terms of endearment.
Favorite music artist.
Ooh. Lauryn Hill.
Favorite sport.
Basketball.
Is there a quote you live by?
I'm part of a greater purpose.
Martin or Fresh Prince?
Martin.
In Living Color or Family Matters?
Living Color.
Uncle Phil or Bill Cosby?
Uncle Phil.
If you can have a combo with anyone dead or alive, who would it be with?
LeBron James.
Favorite podcast to listen to?
Hello, Perspective of the Black Man.
Boom. Just like
it.
that. Boom.
Love it.
Everybody's probably like, what is Terms of Endearment? Let me go look that up. What kind of movie is that?
Go look it up.
I remember Terms of Endearment.
Do you remember that?
I remember the title. Somehow I remember it, but I don't remember the premise now for some reason. But I remember when you said that, I was like, I know Terms of Endearment.
Go look it up. Come back. We'll talk about it. It's definitely one of my favorite movies.
Chances are I've probably seen it because I used to be a movie head once upon a time.
Definitely. I want to give you guys just the number for New York City and the settlements because I said I was going to mention that. So New York City taxpayers in 2019 paid out a whopping $230 million for 6,472 lawsuits. That's 2019.
Insane.
Wow.
Okay. And that's right in the Daily News. You could pull it up. The numbers are there. Like we really need to, and I'm going to just push again, civilian complaint review boards. We really need to push and make sure we have access and that they're actually working for people in the community.
And can I say that is coming from the taxpayer, not from the teachers union? I mean, I'm sorry, the police union. I'm thinking teachers. If it was coming from the police union, I think they would start to change practices. But because it's not coming from them and it's coming from us.
We've been defunding education for a very long time. Let's talk about it.
Right.
So I don't understand what the issue is.
Right.
Oh man, this is great. Judy, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you again so much for your tireless work in the community. Thank you for everything that you also do for the perspectives of Black men. You are, again, our number one super fan. We really, really, really appreciate you. Before we get out of here, I want to also just make sure that we highlight our second segment, which is On the Shelf with Dr. J. Dr. J, this is a segment where we like to give game here. And part of that game is reading. Knowledge is power. So if we can spread knowledge to our people, we can then become and consistently become more powerful together. So without further ado, Dr. J, take us away.
And this connects to what we've been talking about today, right? The racialization of our communities, the segregation of our communities. The book today is called The Color of Law, right? And this book really chronicles, it breaks down the racial redlining that was a part of the creation of Long Island, the creation of many different communities across this nation, where they actually wrote in deeds. They had racial covenants in deeds that you may not sell this property to a Black person. A Black person, they used to say one Black family added to a particular neighborhood or city or community will bring down the value of the entire community. Therefore, you may not sell to them. And it was undergirded by the United States government. So it's important. This is The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America by Richard Rothstein. This is really, really an important book when you want to understand where you live and why you live there and why it has been so difficult for Black people to attain generational wealth.
I think that's great. I think there also may be some people who don't specifically know what redlining is. So if you can just give them a little brief understanding of what exactly redlining is.
So redlining is this practice by which Black people would have the economic ability to purchase homes in certain neighborhoods that they wanted to purchase. And instead of allowing them to purchase homes in those communities, when a Black person would apply for a loan or apply to get, do the application to get a particular house in a particular community, the real estate agents, everybody would be involved in making sure that they block that Black person from purchasing the home. So whereas you had soldiers coming back from World War II in the 1940s, have the same economic picture as their white counterpart, they will go to purchase a home and be basically barred from doing so. And they will be pushed into renters situations or mortgages or agreements that were egregious, the terms. So if you missed a payment, you're late for a payment, they get to keep all your money that you put in the property and take the property and kick you out, like stuff like that. Whereas white families were able to amass generational wealth. So that home that they bought in the 1940s, that was $25,000, and that before they died, it was valued at $600,000. They were able to leave that to their children, and then their children will have down payments for their homes, and they were able to leave it to their grandchildren. So you have multiple generations who capitalize off of racializing and segregating and keeping Black people out of certain communities.
Powerful, powerful term. Definitely one that we need to know in our community. So thank you so much, Dr. Johnson, for highlighting The Color of Law. You look
Judy,
like you're trying to jump on the mic here.
yeah, I just want to, so Judy, obviously you are a part of Black Long Island, and we have talked about some of the community initiatives and some of your involvement in that. If someone listening, is interested in also being involved, how would they do that? Who would they reach out to? So we can, spread this message.
All right. So blacklongisland.net is where you would go. We have a website. It was founded by Billy and Felicia Moss, and it's a vision of for us, by us. Okay. So you go to our website, there's an email address. You can reach out to us. You can see the community events we're doing. Well, in the time of COVID, we're not having any in person, but we're doing some virtual options. We did hold a forum called the State of Education on Long Island. We did that last fall. We also did a Ujamaa festival, and hopefully we can get back to that in 2021 or 2022. But you go right to blacklongisland.net and you can see all of our information. Our Facebook page is Black Long Island. And you can also go there and get a lot of information. There are a lot of resources, restaurants, businesses. We have, many people don't know, Down the Rabbit Hole is a Black-owned winery on the South Shore. So you can find a lot of different resources on blacklongisland.net, but also there are a couple of other resources, Shades of Long Island, Black-owned Long Island. So there are a couple of other people doing great work. And you definitely want to check out Shades of Long Island. She's a young woman from Long Island, and she is doing the thing. Actually, Verdell Jones, that's her daughter, and she is making a mark.
Verdell Jones.
Yeah.
Yes.
And can we say, and folks, before we get out of here, if you don't live on Long Island or in New York or New York City, you have to locate the same sorts of organizations in your communities that fit this profile of unapologetic Blackness, where you're promoting businesses, where you're promoting advocacy. It is not enough to complain on Facebook about the presidential election. Do better. Let's do better together.
Do a search. Don't just
and then vet.
Right, exactly.
If you don't fit, if that don't fit with you, if you think you too hard or too unapologetic for a certain organization, you don't rock with it. But find which one that you rock with, that you can make change with.
Right.
This is going to sound corny, but again, going back to Sesame Street, when you want to learn something new, what do? You look it up. That's simple.
That's it.
You got young kids.
It's funny that you say that. So Gabrielle comes home from school the other day, and they must have been, talking about the 5 senses. And so I was having a conversation with Charles McCann today, and one of the things I said to him, it's like we almost forgot about our 5 senses as we become adults, right? And we stop paying attention to the things going on around us, and we start going into the perception or just what we want it to look like, as opposed to continuing to use those fundamentals.
You are correct.
5 senses.
You are correct.
Looks like a duck, smells like a duck, acts like a duck.
Exactly.
Guess what? But man, we can go on all night. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored, humbled, and like I said, I support your vision and your mission, and I can't wait to continue to take it to the next step.
Thank you so much. And neither can we. Again, this is the perspectives of Black men covering trending topics through a unapologetic Black lens. Again, we went over police brutality today, what we can do in our community, gave some game as to be a more effective community leader and community advocate. Just so many gems dropped. We talked about redlining, understanding, that process and understanding how we need to be able to get loans and be able to move into certain areas. Again, The Color of Law. Please look into that book. And just drop the name of the book that you mentioned for us, Judy, as well.
Yes, The Counter Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. And I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah.
You can tell my book is old. But I'll put it in the chat and they can have it. This is an awesome book. And it talks about, what we see in our school districts that are happening now.
Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu has been on this for a long time.
Yeah.
He was on Oprah back in the day. Like, he was the stuff that a lot of people are regurgitating now, he was saying a long time ago. The Dr. Francis Cress Welsings of the world and our and Dr. Amos Wilson, we have our heroes. They've been saying this for a long time. We got the game. You just got to go ahead and attain it, you know?
And this is where the history and education comes in. So very, very important. Again, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. This is a Black Man. Please like, subscribe. We're also on Spotify. Shout out to Spotify. So you can find the podcast on Spotify as well. Again, thank you so much, Trudy, for being on tonight. And to all of our listeners, thank you. And we'll see you again next week.
Peace.
Peace. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you. I don't know. I like how she has no